For activity number 5, what we're essentially going to do is what I call the commitment board activity coupled with some peer coaching. The outcome of this is essentially going to be you will have a chance to develop your own commitment statement. Thanks. Um, Building upon all of the things that we've talked about and explored today about what it means to be an entrepreneur within the federal government. And before we do that, just to give you a little bit of inspiration, we're going to have a report out from Boris and Erica. Boris was previously detailed to the PIC, and Erica is with the PIC. All right.
Okay, thank you, Lavida. So, what we want to do is just talk a little bit about what you all came up with here. So, your grouping of ideas. So, you've been getting all this great information. So, now what do we do with this? What are we going to do tomorrow, all of us, when we go back to our day jobs? And so, what Eric and I were actually, Mary Crew Call as well, we were looking at your ideas and sort of 6 different categories emerge. And there is sort of a sequence too of the things that you all came up with here. So we're starting on this end here. We're looking at some of the ideas talk to setting a culture of creativity. And things like, for example, building to leadership development programs, what it is, how to identify support. And I heard a lot of those types of comments from the panel. And then we move on to something about building engagement and understanding. So this gets into interactions within your agencies, things like build a network of folks doing similar work outside of my organization to share best practices. So this is about beginning that conversation. There is power in numbers. The other category that we saw a lot of ideas on is expanding the idea-based relationships, and this is kind of building relationships. So building engagement and understanding, but this is about relationships, things about partnerships. You're talking about selling the ideas. Lots of outstanding thoughts from the panel on that. And then we sort of make another move here. So if you look at these 3 categories, sort of talks to building some consistency among you all, and then just that interaction that builds that, I would say, momentum. And then on this side, these 3 categories almost talk more about planning and execution. As a good PIC organization, we always talk about planning and execution, so you're in the right place. This category talks about taking specific action. So some of you actually had Nike Just Do It, right? Just do it. Things like make specific doable ideas, steps, commit to a specific course of action, engage throughout the organization for buy-in. And then this category here is about creating a strategy for new ideas. A lot of strategic types in this room. And there are a lot of things here about building strategic plans, specifically for creativity, for entrepreneurship. And then this last category here was those of you like Missouri, the show me state, show me the money, right? So this is about actually prototyping, testing some things, taking some initiative to build some prototype programs. A lot of the design thinking is just iterate. So you just continue to test it out, try it out, small scale, then roll it out. And so it sort of builds as a couple of key takeaways from looking at this, particularly these first 3 categories. It's about community of practice. And I heard that from the panels a couple of times from the panel. About building a community of practice. And here over here is just really actually practicing what we're building here and testing it out, and then sort of building a cycle. The other lady that worked with us, Mary Crew Call, so we call it a Crew Call cycle. That's a new term here, born in the PIC. But anyway, it's just really a cycle as you build a community of practice, you start taking some actions, you do some planning, you pilot, you learn some things, then you go back, and then you start building this culture here. So, Erica, any other thoughts on your end?
Well, Boris, you did a great job of summarizing. So just a few things to point out. In the expanding idea-based relationships, a lot of these post-its actually had to deal with sort of finding that advocate, finding that champion at a senior level, which I think, we also heard in a lot of the breakouts. You all are sort of trying to, I could hear the wheels turning. Who am I going to go to sort of get top cover? How am I going to get some sort of advocacy so that I can continue to sort of push forward these new ideas? I think the emphasis in all of these, though, is really that ideas-based relationship. So it isn't about sort of self-promotion. It isn't even necessarily about a specific mission area, but you all started talking about how can we find people who are interested in this idea and sort of working out this idea, massaging it, shaping it, turning it into something real. So I just wanted to clarify that here. One of the things that you'll just notice about sort of the amount of Post-its as we were grouping these things, I think more of you are sort of still in sort of 1, 2, 3, sort of leaning towards 4, getting to the point of action. But we were seeing sort of less Post-its come out from you all, less ideas around actually starting to get to that planning, that being able to actually create something implementable, and then the ideas around how to demonstrate that value through a demonstration project, a pilot, something that's at the appropriate scale. So we would just encourage you to continue throughout the rest of the day, starting to think more about how do we take it out of this space and start to move it towards something that we can start to practice, to Boris's point.
Okay. So, La Vida, back to you.
Thank you so much, Boris and Erica. I hope that what they shared resonated with you. I have to say, for me, what was most striking is actually that sort of gradual tapering off to where we start with sort of around 1 through 4, seeing a lot of Post-its populating that space, but by the time we got to 6, having 2. So what I would share is that for this to be our, sort of inaugural Fedpreneur, Entrepreneurial Federal Government Summit, it's good to take a snapshot of where we are. However, as we start to engage and sustain this initiative over time by growing our community of practice and interacting more, it would be great to see, say, quote unquote, box 6 there be a bit more populated, because over time I would expect that folks within our community of practice, you will grow your confidence. You'll become more comfortable with the idea of implementing maybe earlier than you would have conceived of prior to really putting a lot more thought and exploration into what can I do to fully embrace my authority here and now in the job that I have to make the most of it, right, on behalf of the American people. So what I'd like to do now is have a shift to doing a little bit of peer coaching after doing some individual work. So for those of you who still have your folders from this morning, and if you don't, that's okay, please take the remaining Post-it that you do have, and I'd like for you to complete the following sentence. Using an entrepreneurial approach to improve mission delivery within my home organization, I commit to fill in the blank, and my first step towards implementation will be to fill in the blank. What I'd like for you guys to do is to fill in those 2 blanks. Give it some thought as an individual first, and then turn to your neighbor. It's okay if you guys form a group of 2 or even a group of 3. That's just fine. But when you're comfortable, turn to your neighbor and share your commitment statement. And the neighbors, what I expect from you guys is to essentially push your individual neighbor and partner. Push them to be a bit more bold. We've got to get more than 2 people in that box, all right? So that's our objective for today, is to get a couple more folks in that box so that we can move out on implementation. And then after you've engaged in your peer coaching, we can then have a bit of sharing, where I'd like for a couple folks to come up and share some of the commitments that you've made, and then we can actually populate the commitment board here so that the larger group here can browse all of the various commitments that have been conceived by you guys. So any questions before we get started? All right, if you need Post-its or Sharpies, we have a lovely gentleman here passing them out. All right, so we'll take a few minutes to do that, and I'll check back in with you.